I've been using the Sony a6300 for the last few months, and I'm now ready to share my review and thoughts with you. And I'm going to give you the summary of that review right after this. So this camera is, for most people, the best hybrid photo and video camera under $1,000 you can buy. There really is nothing else on the market that is as feature-packed and provides this level of image and video quality right now. But I want to dive in, talk about some of its features, and figure out if you are a photographer or a videographer that this is going to work well for, because it's not a perfect camera. There's no such thing. It certainly isn't for everyone. But before we really get into that, I want to just remind you briefly my feelings on the a6000. I really liked that camera. It was the first mirrorless camera where I thought, hey, this is the camera for the masses. This is the one that most people should get when upgrading from a point and shoot. Why? Primarily, that lightweight and small form factor. The number of times I hear from someone that moved up from a point and shoot to a DSLR and quickly got tired of carrying around a bigger, heavier camera is depressingly often. And the a6000 and now the a6300 provides better image quality than most of the DSLRs on the market, with only a few drawbacks at a much lighter and smaller form factor. Let's talk about some of the other strengths besides just its small lightweightness. We've got fast and capable AF system in this a6300. 11 frames per second, that is very fast. Class-leading low light performance, and overall top-notch image and video quality. In more detail, let's talk about that focusing a little bit, because that's key, and that's some place where typically mirrorless has lagged a little behind your traditional DSLR. The 4D focusing, it's a marketing term, but in real-world use, I've been continually impressed with the AF system in this camera, and there are two new features that I think are pretty sweet that complement that. At the Sony event in Florida, we shot fast-moving wakeboarders, parkour athletes, salsa dancers, and I was impressed with the speed and tracking capabilities in a variety of lighting conditions. In one example, I watched the tracking squares lock on and follow a sprinting, tumbling parkour athlete cross from one corner of the frame to the other. During that time, he moved by other people, intersecting objects, the big cushiony things they were jumping on, and it capably tracked him across the screen. I was really impressed. And when I compare the system to the earlier a6000, I see noticeable improvements in the speed and intelligence of the focusing system. Now, one of my big complaints about Sony cameras in general, this is both the a6000 and the higher-end a7 series, is picking the focus point. There's no touchscreen, it's kind of a bummer, and there's no dedicated joystick. That makes it difficult to really select your point when you're not letting the camera do it. But a new feature on the a6300 I really like, the focus selector, helps. This allows you to use the directional pad on the back as a joystick to move your focus point without an extra button press. See, the new part of this feature is that it remains in joystick mode until you take it out of that mode. This does require an extra press to get into the other functions of that directional pad, like if you leave ISO on there or exposure compensation. So it's not perfect, but after using this for a few weeks, I did find it the quickest way to work, and it actually makes it easier to select a point than on DSLRs in the same price range that are missing that joystick. Another focus feature I'm in love with is the focus magnifier. Now again, other cameras have a similar feature, but the a6300's implementation is excellent. And for macro work or any precise focusing, it has worked really well, and I appreciate it. Focusing during movies is also impressive with decent tracking capabilities and customization options, but this is where something like the 70D and 80D do offer nice advantages with that touchscreen if you want to be able to touch to focus or create those kind of cinematic focus changes automatically. That touchscreen works really well and offers a clear advantage there. But with those, you are limited to 1080p at 60 frames per second with the 80D, and the 70D tops out at 30 frames per second. Contrasting that with a Sony, you've got 4K at 30 frames per second, and at 1080 you can do 120 frames per second, and it all looks better, especially in low light. Nothing else provides this image video quality at this price point. Now, I've had this camera or the a6000 in my hand for the past few months, and I'm reminded just how important being comfortable with your camera is in terms of efficiency and happiness in use. For a long period of my shooting, I've preferred the bigger, heavier cameras that give me a more manual control with more buttons. But the additional customization points the Sony offers, plus that focus joystick mode now that I mentioned, I'd rather walk out the door with this camera in my hand for most of my shooting. I can even operate it one-handed comfortably, and I find that very sweet. So I said most of my shooting. What wouldn't I use this camera for? Well, wildlife. And this isn't really a direct reflection on the camera itself, it's a lack of longer lenses. If you're serious about wildlife or sports, Sony still doesn't offer longer lenses that are going to do the job without using adapters. If you're a parent and you have a kid in sports, the autofocus and the 11 frames per second and a decent lens like the 55-210 will do a job better than many similarly priced DSLRs, but if you want to go longer than that, you really have very few options, one of which is the 70-300, which looks like it's going to be awesome, but it's priced above what many casual or enthusiast photographers are willing to pay. And from here we can have a bigger discussion about the lenses for a minute. This is still a strength of Canon and Nikon, not only with loads more options, especially in the longer zoom ranges, but many very affordable options as well, though Sony is working on this, and for most of us the list is excellent. I've got a pile of lenses here that I've been very happy to shoot with. Some of them keep that form factor nice and small and complement the small size of the a6300 nicely. And I have to say, I do love the size of the entire package with the kit lens. It's extremely portable, but I don't love the kit lens itself. It's just okay. And recommend you consider picking up a prime, like the 30 or 35 or the 50, or saving for something like the 16-70 f4, which when paired with the a6300 is just an awesome walk-around combination that gives you a huge variety that you're capable of shooting and beautiful quality. Another category I'm hesitant to recommend this camera for right now is serious videographers, those that need to record for longer stretches at a time. In some conditions, it does seem likely to overheat, and while I've successfully recorded back-to-back video clips of 29 minutes in my office at an ambient temperature of 72 Fahrenheit, and I only saw the temperature warning once, I have heard from enough other users and reviewers to concern me. Though many of the Sony a7R Mark II's overheating issues seem to have settled down with a firmware update, we can be hopeful that this too will get fixed. Until then, I would not rely on it for long-form, professionally recorded video. But the mic jack is a nice additional option, along with other useful features that you really are nowhere to be found in DSLRs, like focus peaking, like the S-Log format. And thinking about the vlogger, or actually somebody like me who does a lot of this talking head and sometimes films solo, you can start and stop video from the app, and while you can't touch the focus from the app, you can allow the camera to get autofocus and then from the app switch to manual focus. So again, thinking of people like me who need to set up in this way in a talking head, that sure does work nicely, and switching to manual focus remotely, make sure it doesn't wander off in the middle of the shooting. Along with that, the Wi-Fi works well overall, and while I don't love the idea, this is only kind of related to the Wi-Fi, of paying this much for a camera and then shelling out additional dollars for those apps like time-lapse and Sky HDR, you don't actually have to purchase those. You could still use a trigger trap in place of the time-lapse, or you could shoot multiple images for the Sky HDR. But I guess I grudgingly appreciate the ability to add additional functionality outside of firmware updates to the camera. I just wish it was a little bit easier, and that's when I really miss a touchscreen, when I have to input my password on the stupid Sony screen on the back of the camera. That's when I want a touchscreen more than any other time. A few other issues. The screen can be hard to see in very bright light. Luckily, the viewfinder has been upgraded over the a6000, and I'm very happy to use it when necessary. And while I mentioned that 11 frames per second, which is impressive, I don't like the way the camera locks up while writing. And if you really shoot a long burst of RAW, you're going to be waiting to get into the menu or to review any of those images, though fast SD cards help, and I've got a couple recommended brands down below. Battery life, it can be an issue if you aren't careful, but I'm not going to talk about it as much as I have in the past because, one, you can charge from a USB battery, which I often have with me while charging my phones anyway, and I think that actually makes it a better travel camera in some situations than coming along with a DSLR where you have to be worried about reaching an outlet at certain times of the day. And again, I just want to stress that there really is no other camera that is as feature-packed and provides such good quality, especially in low light, at this price point. But Certain categories of photographers and videographers may be better considering alternatives. Though I think for most people watching this video, you, like me, will be very happy to head out the door with this camera, especially if you want a camera small enough and light enough to go just about anywhere without sacrificing any of that quality. And the last thoughts I want to throw out there, because I often get asked this: should a6000 users upgrade? I rarely recommend going from one model to the very next. It just usually isn't a great value. You're better off spending your money on a nice prime lens, something like the Sigma 30 or the Macro. That's going to give you a better value for your dollar than jumping to that next model. But I could be convinced, because this is not a minor upgrade. Noticeable low light improvement, greatly improved focusing system. That's excellent features. And if you want much better low light performance, or you are photographing action or a little bit speedier stuff, that focusing system may be of value to you. But remember, the a6000 is still a good camera. I've spent the last few months, one was shooting a family vacation with the a6000. And for something like that, for travel, I was very happy, and I would appreciate that extra value that saving for other lenses would give me. It's a great general photography camera. If you appreciated this review, take a moment to hit the thumbs up button, and if you're not already a subscriber, take a moment to hit that subscribe button. We've got some exciting content coming in the coming weeks and months ahead, and I'd appreciate your subscription. As always, thanks for watching.